Alright guys, welcome back to the video. So we're in a weird place of the shop because I want to talk about the steam box here. So what we're going to be doing in this video is rebuilding the steam box out of some cedar. Now if you guys haven't seen it yet, I made a video a little while back all about different chair making jigs that I was putting together just so I could start making some chairs in that. And in that video I very much said that all of the jigs that I was making were meant as kind of a first generation, a first attempt at making each of those things. So just to see if they would work, see if they function the way that I want, and then eventually I would go through and make better versions of them. And the most important one of that was the steam box that I made for steam bending. So in this first one that I built here, I just used pressure treated wood, which is the completely wrong thing to use for a steam box, for a few good reasons, which we'll talk about in just a second here. But the reason I went for pressure treated wood rather than one of the proper options is purely because it was super cheap. For the two boards I needed for the steam box, it was only about 20 bucks, so it's very cheap, very affordable, and I could throw it together and just find out if it worked. Because until I built this steam box, until I got the steamer and got everything all set up and actually did some testing, I did not think that I would be able to steam bend living here in Calgary, Alberta, where I don't have access to good quality air-dried lumber. Now, after a little bit of trial and error and a lot of helpful tips from all over the internet, I found a few different ways to actually make that kiln-dried wood work, and it works amazing. I can get the bends that I need. Now, I can't do anything like the really crazy Windsor, bent back chairs that have, the big curves to them. I can't do that kind of stuff with steam bending kiln-dried wood. Or at least I haven't been able to figure out how to do it yet. So the only thing I really want to be able to do with steam bending is make bent chair backs. So this is a 1.5 inch round piece that I turned on the lathe, and then I put it in the steamer, bent the back of it, and now we have this nice slight angle to the back there, so it's a little bit more comfortable to sit on. The other thing is chair slats. So this is a nice curved slat, very comfortable to rest against your back with, much better than just having a straight piece of wood there. So both of these pieces and a few other pieces I have laying around the shop here was all I needed to realize that this is actually something that is feasible. All I need to do before I use this on an actual project is upgrade my steam box, because the pressure treated wood has one big flaw to it, and that's that it's made of pine and has a ton of chemicals mixed into it. So as you can see on this white oak slat here, we have just a ton of gross staining all over it. Some of it is water stained, which is completely normal when you're steam bending, but there's also a lot of the chemicals that are used in pressure treated wood that seeped out onto here, as well as a ton of pine resin that turned to liquid just due to the heat and the moisture, and dripped all over all of my pieces here. So pressure treated wood really is not an option for a steam box unless you plan to do a ton of sanding afterwards. Even though it's cheap and functional, it has a lot of negative sides to it. All right, so I have the steam generator plugged in, it's starting to heat up, and it takes about 10-15 minutes for it to actually fully heat up to get to the point where we're pumping out steam. So we're gonna talk about the way that this box is designed just kind of quickly here. So obviously the big difference between this one and the old one is that this one is made from cedar. That's the kind of the main difference. But there's also a lot of little subtle stuff too. Like one of the big ones, you can see the orientation is different. This one I have the sides going up here, and then we've got the flat part here. Because the problem that I found with the other one is that having the seam on the bottom, on the underside of the box, meant that all the moisture in that was dripping out that seam. So I'm hoping that by doing it in this orientation here, that'll make the water run down the bottom of the bottom board there and prevent it from dripping out all over the place. Putting it in this orientation also allowed me to get 2 levels. So I have an upper level and a bottom level, and that just means that I can do twice as much stuff at a time. Now this box has the same limitation of 42 inches on the inside here, which is the maximum amount I can do on my lathe anyway, so I'm not too concerned about doing anything longer than that. If I ever get into, extreme steam bending, I can always build another box. And so you can see on the front here, I also went a little extreme with the insulation and the padding there, because I want to make sure that when this thing is closed, it's closed up nice and tight and sealed. Because on the first version, I had a lot of this stuff start peeling off because this obviously is not meant. This is just held on with some really weak glue. It's not on there very well. And so I just went in with some 22 gauge upholstery staples to just hold that insulation in there. That way when the door is shut, everything is going to be sealed up nicely. Now the important thing when you're making a steam box is you want it to be as sealed as absolutely possible, but you need to make sure you have a vent hole in the front so that way you're not building a pressure cooker. Because if you're just pumping steam into a space, it's going to build up pressure and eventually go bang or just fail. So we do have a vent hole in the front, but I also want it to be as sealed as possible. I'm also using this rubber bungee cord this time instead of just a string to tie it off because again, I want this to be as tight and as sealed as possible. The other part of that is the rivets you saw me cut into the top and the bottom piece here. Now, the idea behind the rivets is I just think that that's going to create a little bit more of a sure seal. Because this is only held together with screws, I wanted to just make sure that everything was as tight together as possible, and I figured having that extra lip on the inside would just create a little bit of a better seal. And again, coming back to the outside, on all the dowel holes, I went back in and covered them with a bunch of epoxy. So on the one side, the dowels are glued in place with the epoxy, and then on the opposite side, where I obviously couldn't glue them in, I just cut the dowels off and then covered those hole openings with epoxy just to make sure everything is as sealed as it possibly can be. So this should be a very good box, I think. We'll have to see how it does in the long run, but this is definitely the way that I was planning to build the box all along. That first iteration was just to see if the whole method works. So all I'm doing now is I'm just going to run the box for about 2 hours before I put any project pieces or anything like that in it, just to make sure that it's good to go. It's all, there's not going to be any issues with it. Because what I don't want to have is, I don't want to put a project piece in there. I'll be expecting to steam it for X amount of time, come back and, find this thing in pieces for some reason. So I just want to make sure before I do anything for my actual projects, that this thing is all good to go. There's nothing that I have to make changes to.